It wasn't always like it. There was a time when I constantly pushed myself to become someone I thought I had to be. I overthought the future, set unrealistic expectations, and forgot to live in the present. And the result, my mind never rested. My body was constantly tired, tense. Some nights I couldn't sleep at all. But then I encountered the wisdom of Buddhist teachings. Gradually, I began to understand what truly matters. My mind calmed. I learned to return to myself gently, without forcing. And slowly, deeper sleep returned. If you've ever felt the same, then this video is for you.
You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, eyes closed, the world finally quiet, but your mind refuses to rest? The room is still, but inside, your thoughts are moving like waves, soft, endless, pulling you deeper into wakefulness instead of sleep. Tonight, I want to invite you to do something different. Not to fix your thoughts, not to silence them, but to meet them with something they're not used to, gentle awareness. Let's fall asleep, not by escaping our minds, but by returning home to them. Softly, slowly, kindly, imagine moving through life with a quiet strength, feeling centered, grounded, and deeply okay with who you are. Imagine carrying that steadiness inside you, knowing that no matter what storms come your way, there's a calm place within that doesn't shake. It sounds peaceful, right? But if we're honest, how often do we actually feel that way? Most of us have moments where we feel disconnected, like something's missing, like we're broken, or not enough. We chase after achievements, attention, love, believing that somewhere out there is the missing piece. But no matter how much we gather, the feeling doesn't go away. Because wholeness was never out there to begin with. It's something quiet, something we remember, not achieve. The way we speak to ourselves, the way we show up for our own hearts, this is what shapes our reality. When you move through your day with gentleness, with compassion and a little wisdom, life begins to feel lighter. Even silence becomes supportive. But when we rush through life, constantly judging ourselves, constantly performing, we carry stress even in our most peaceful moments. It's exhausting. That's why tonight, I want to share with you a path, a quiet one. A way to return to yourself with softness. Not just nice words, but time-tested truths, teachings that have held space for people, just like you and me, for thousands of years. And when you truly understand them, something shifts. The way you treat your own thoughts, the way you hold your heart, it all begins to soften, to open, to heal. But before we begin, I want to ask you for a small promise. Nothing big, just type in the comments, "I choose peace." It may seem simple, but you're doing more than typing words. You're planting a seed of stillness, of presence, of love. And like all seeds, the more you return to it, the more it grows. So, go ahead, write it. And as we begin, let it be your quiet intention tonight. We all know the feeling of lying in bed. Not because we're not tired, but because the mind won't let go. Thoughts come, one after another, like ripples that never settle. It's not loud, but it's there, a tension behind the eyes. A weight on the chest that no one else sees. And what do? We try harder, meditate harder, breathe deeper, force calmness into our bodies like trying to push a river to flow backwards. But you already know, force doesn't work. The more we demand peace, the further it moves from us. There's another way, a softer one, a quieter one. This is the way of soft awareness. Instead of trying to control your thoughts, you simply sit with them. Not judging, not fixing, just noticing. Think of your awareness not as a spotlight, but as a warm, gentle light filling a quiet room. You're not standing guard over your thoughts. You're simply being with them. Like sitting beside an old friend. No words needed. And something beautiful happens when you do this. Your nervous system relaxes. Your brain begins to change, literally. Neuroscience shows us that when we observe our thoughts without judgment, without control, the areas responsible for anxiety and self-criticism begin to calm. This isn't wishful thinking, it's biology, and it begins with a single choice: stop fighting. Let your awareness soften. Let yourself be held by your own presence. Soft awareness isn't being lazy or zoning out. It's more like holding a crying child, not to fix them, but to be there, fully, gently. When you turn that presence inward, you begin to meet parts of yourself you've avoided, stories you've carried for years, thoughts you've labeled too much, emotions you've tried to hide. But when you stop resisting them, they begin to loosen, to breathe, to quiet, not because you've silenced them, but because you've stopped feeding them with fear. There's a kind of awareness that doesn't cling and doesn't push away. And somehow, just by doing that, by not interfering, it becomes healing all by itself. In Buddhism, this is not a new idea. It's a very old one. In the teachings of the Satipatthana, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we are not told to control the mind, but to simply observe. To notice the body, the feelings, the states of mind, and mental objects, with clarity, and with kindness. That one word, kindness, changes everything. Because mindfulness isn't a weapon. It's not something we use to silence or suppress our inner world. It's an invitation to open the door, and welcome it in with understanding. So, let's begin where the Buddha often began, with the body. Most people try to live above the neck. We use the body to move around, to get things done, but we're rarely in the body. We avoid it. We disconnect from it. Sometimes we even resent it. But here's the truth: the body remembers. It holds the imprint of every moment you've survived, every joy, every sorrow, every silent struggle. When you bring soft awareness to your body, not to fix it, but simply to be with it, it hears you. Place your attention gently on the breath. Notice the warmth in your palms. Feel the tightness in your chest, not as a problem, but as a message. In doing that, you're quietly telling your body, I see you. You don't need to brace yourself anymore. The breath becomes a doorway, not because you're trying to breathe a certain way, but because the breath is always here, faithful, present, a reminder that life is still moving through you. And when you follow it, not with force, but with softness, it reveals a gentle truth. You don't have to do anything right now. Just be. Next, let's talk about feelings. Some of us run from them. Others drown in them. But there's a third way: to stay with them. Gently. Not to analyze. Not to label. Not to solve, just to notice. Feelings, like waves, rise and fall when you give them space. And when you stop calling them good or bad, they begin to shift. Even sadness becomes less heavy. Even fear feels less like a threat and more like a visitor, one that was never meant to stay. With soft awareness, your emotions stop defining who you are. You're no longer an anxious person. You're simply a person feeling a moment of anxiety. And that moment passes, like a breeze through an open window. Now, let's be honest, the mind is the trickiest of all. It loves to plan, to compare, to judge, to imagine. That's its nature. It spins stories faster than we can keep up with. But here's the secret most people never hear. When you stop fighting your thoughts, they lose their grip. You no longer feel like you're trapped inside them. Instead, you're watching them, like clouds drifting through a sky that doesn't need to hold them. Soft awareness creates distance, not coldness, but kindness. Like watching a leaf float gently downstream, you let the thoughts pass. And yes, sometimes you'll still get pulled in. That's human, that's okay, we all do. But when your habit becomes returning, coming back, gently, again and again, the mind begins to trust. It realizes it doesn't have to scream to be heard. The Satipatthana also speaks of awareness of the dharmas, the teachings, the inner patterns, the mental tendencies we all carry. It teaches us to observe the 5 hindrances when they arise: craving, aversion, restlessness, sleepiness, doubt, and once again, the answer isn't to fight them. Pushing them only creates more resistance. Instead, you just notice, restlessness is here. And that's enough. You don't need to get rid of it. Just by naming it softly, without shame or urgency, you take away its sharpness. It's like a spotlight turning into a candlelight, still illuminating, but without intensity, and slowly, the mind becomes less reactive and more curious. Curiosity, in fact, is one of the greatest companions to soft awareness. When you're curious, you're not judging, you're exploring, you're open. You begin to see yourself not as someone broken, but as someone alive. And in that gentleness, in that quiet exploration, you return to something that's always been whole. You are not broken. You are not failing at being mindful. You are simply layered. Layer upon layer, beliefs, fears, habits, each one shaped by a moment you needed to survive. Each one added not because you were flawed, but because you were human. And beneath it all, beneath the fear, beneath the busy mind, beneath the tension, there is something that has never left you. Stillness, wholeness, awareness. It's all still there, just temporarily buried under the noise. People often ask, how do I stay mindful all day? But maybe that's the wrong question. The better question might be, how do I keep coming back, again and again, without judging myself for forgetting? Because that's where real change begins. Not in perfection, but in the softness of return. Noticing that you've drifted, and gently returning. Again, and again, and again. That's the practice. That's the path. Let's talk for a moment about your nervous system. When you're constantly doing, solving, rushing, pushing, your body is in a subtle state of stress. Not always obvious, but it's there. Muscles stay tight. Breathing becomes shallow. Sleep doesn't come easily. And your heart never really rests. But the moment you allow yourself to pause, to rest in soft awareness, something incredible happens. You activate the parasympathetic nervous system. It's your body's natural healing mode. Your heart rate slows, breath deepens, digestion improves, and most importantly, your body begins to remember what safety feels like. This is not about going on a long retreat. You don't need a cave or monastery. It's about this moment, right now. So let me ask you, can you feel the texture of your clothes against your skin? Can you notice your jaw, and let it loosen just a little? Can you let the next breath come to you, instead of pulling it in? That's it. That's soft awareness. One of the most beautiful things about this practice is how it begins to dissolve the habit of inner judgment. You stop labeling your thoughts as good or bad. You stop beating yourself up for not doing enough. You just notice. And in that gentle noticing, something begins to heal. There's more space, more self-kindness, more ease. You know what else grows in that silence? Compassion. And not just for yourself. When you stop fighting your own mind, you start seeing others differently too. That person who irritates you, they're just caught in their own storm. You don't excuse their behavior, but you don't make it about you anymore. Your awareness becomes less sharp, more spacious. This kind of presence transforms your relationships. You listen more than you try to fix. You pause before reacting. You speak more slowly, without urgency. Because you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're simply being here. Soft awareness also brings with it a quiet form of surrender. Not the kind where you give up, but the kind where you let go of needing to control every detail. You begin to trust that clarity will come, that emotions will pass, that life unfolds on its own timing. This doesn't make you passive. In fact, when you stop wasting energy on control, you gain energy to take wise action. Action that comes from stillness, not panic. From clarity, not desperation. You begin to move when it's time to move. And rest when it's time to rest. You start to feel a rhythm, not imposed by pressure, but aligned with your own inner timing. You listen to the body. You honor the heart. And then something else shifts. Your relationship with discomfort, pain, whether emotional or physical, used to be something you ran from. Now, it becomes something you're willing to sit beside. Not because you enjoy it, but because you're no longer afraid of it. You learn to hold pain, like you would hold a frightened child. Not pushing it away, not letting it take over. Just being with it. Until it softens. This kind of gentle practice gives rise to a new kind of resilience. Not the hard kind that bulldozes through everything, but the soft kind that bends without breaking. It's quiet, but steady, and sometimes, it even gives rise to joy. Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet joy that bubbles up when you realize nothing is missing. When you're sitting in silence, sipping tea, and you suddenly feel you are fully here. That's the gift of soft awareness. Because the world keeps telling you to hustle, to push harder, to prove your worth. But the deepest truths, they are not found in effort. They are revealed in stillness. The deepest truths are not hidden in complexity. They don't live in distant mountaintops or within the pages of rare books. They are found right here. In stillness. In breath. In presence. You don't need to be better. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to be here. And that's what this journey has been guiding you toward all along. Not toward a new version of yourself, but toward the real you. The one who was never broken. Never missing. Only waiting for you to notice. So tonight, when your head touches the pillow, don't try to meditate. Don't try to be mindful. There's no effort needed here. Just notice the warmth of the blanket around you. The gentle pull of gravity holding your body. The quiet kindness of your breath moving in and out. Let your awareness soften. Let it hold you like the arms of a dear friend. Let it carry you home. Not to a place, but to a feeling. Because even the quietest kind of peace can feel incomplete if you've been taught to leave parts of yourself behind. You may carry calm in your breath, softness in your attention, and still feel like something is missing. Like a room in the house of your being remains locked. And there's a reason for that. Soft awareness opens the door. But who you welcome inside is what completes the journey. And this is where we go next. Not just into presence, but into love. Not love as a philosophy. Not love as performance. But the kind of love you once needed. And never received. The kind of love you now owe to yourself. Somewhere along the way, you learn to split yourself in two. The parts of you that were acceptable, and the parts that were not. The version that smiles, stays composed, says the right thing. The version that doesn't cry too much. That doesn't take up space. That always puts others first. You wore that version like a mask, so convincingly. You forgot it was a mask at all. But the parts you pushed away? They didn't die. They just went quiet. In Buddhism, the practice of metta, loving kindness, is often misunderstood as something outward. As wishing well to strangers. As radiating love into the world. And yes, it can be all that. But at its heart, metta begins inward. It begins with turning toward the places inside you that you've long avoided, the parts of you labeled too sensitive, too emotional, too angry, too needy, too much. Metta is not a concept. It's a practice. It's what happens when you sit quietly with the version of you that still carries the bruise of childhood rejection. The one who was told, "You're not smart enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not strong enough." And instead of trying to fix that part, you listen, you stay, you offer warmth, not judgment. This healing work begins not with joy, but with acknowledgement, because most of us move through the world numb to our own self-rejection. It hides behind striving, behind achievement, behind perfectionism, behind overthinking. It sounds like, "I just want to improve. I should be over this by now." But metta is not self-improvement. It is self-returning. It's saying to those quiet corners of your being, "You are welcome here, even now, especially now." And here's something important to remember. You don't begin by feeling love. You begin by intending it. That's the secret most people miss. Metta doesn't require you to be in a good mood. It doesn't require warmth or tears or bliss. It simply asks you to plant the seed. Even when the soil feels dry. Even when your heart feels closed. You say the phrases not because you already believe them, but because you are learning how to believe them. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be happy. May I live with ease. You start there, slowly, gently. And yes, resistance will come. That's part of the process. Because you've trained your mind for so many years to believe it must earn love. You've whispered cruel things to yourself. Things you would never say to another human being. So of course it takes time. Of course it takes tenderness. But remember, the purpose of metta is not to create fake happiness. It's to bring compassion to what is already here. If sadness is present, let the wish for safety hold it. If anger is rising, let the wish for ease cradle it. You don't need to clean yourself up before offering kindness. That's the whole point. Every time you repeat those simple phrases of loving kindness, you're not just saying words. You're carving new pathways in the mind. New grooves of care, of safety, of warmth. You're slowly teaching your brain a new language. It's safe to care for myself. And little by little, your nervous system begins to soften. Not because you forced it, but because kindness makes the body feel safe. This practice may stir things long forgotten. You might feel unexpected tears and not know exactly why. Or you may feel nothing at all. Both are welcome, because the goal is not to chase a particular feeling. Not joy, not peace, not even love. The goal is simply to stay present. To stay with what is. You're not trying to replace sadness with love. You're learning to meet sadness with love. There's a world of difference between the two. One tries to fix. The other chooses to stay. This is where true reconciliation begins. Not in getting rid of pain, but in allowing it to be met with kindness. And as you keep practicing, you'll start to notice something powerful. The way you talk to yourself begins to change. The inner critic, that voice that echoes parents, teachers, old wounds, it begins to soften. It doesn't disappear overnight, but it no longer rules you. You see, the inner critic is not evil. It's often just scared, a wounded protector, trying to keep you safe in the only way it knows how. And when you say, "May I be kind to myself," you're not excluding the critic. You're including it. You're saying, even you, even the hard voices, you're allowed to be here. That's how a new kind of inner language is born. Not forced positivity, but truthful care. You start saying things like, "This is hard, and I'm doing my best. I don't have to be perfect to be worthy. It's okay to be tired. I'm allowed to rest." These aren't just affirmations. They're lifelines. Words that anchor you in the storm of your own expectations. Metta also brings you face to face with a tender kind of abandonment. Not just how others may have left you, but the ways you've abandoned yourself. The passions you gave up, just to keep someone else comfortable. The boundaries you didn't set, because you didn't want to seem difficult. The voice you silenced, just to keep the peace. But this practice doesn't shame you for those choices. It understands them, and it invites you to return. So what would it mean to offer kindness to the version of you that never felt chosen? Maybe it means writing a letter to your younger self, not to fix the past, but to acknowledge it. Maybe it means standing in front of a mirror, saying the phrases out loud, even if your voice trembles. Maybe it's as simple as placing a hand on your chest when you feel lonely. Small gestures, quiet revolutions. Because loving kindness isn't just for the mind. It's for the body, too. The body that's carried tension for decades. That's held its breath, waiting for permission to rest. That's been punished through overwork, or ignored in silence. Metta can live in your movements. When you stretch in the morning, can you do it gently, without force? When you eat, can it be nourishment, not reward or punishment? When you bathe, can the water remind you, I am worth tending to? Metta is not about waiting to feel whole. It's about treating yourself as if you are already whole, and letting the truth of that rise to the surface. Slowly, over time, and something beautiful begins to happen. This practice ripples outward. When you've truly faced your own pain with love, you begin to see others differently. Their anger feels less threatening. Their coldness feels less personal. You begin to recognize the pain beneath their actions. This doesn't mean you excuse cruelty, but you respond, rather than react. That's a powerful shift. And boundaries? They become clearer, not harder. You say no, not out of anger, but because you value your peace. You walk away, not from coldness, but from returning to yourself. And even joy becomes easier to access. Not the joy you chase, but the joy you notice. The quiet joy of being fully here, even if just for a moment. There are moments, small, quiet ones, that don't ask for attention but offer deep healing. The warmth of the sun resting on your cheek. The hush of early morning before the world stirs. The smile that rises, unprovoked, from somewhere deep inside. These are not grand events. But they matter, because when you stop rejecting yourself, life begins to feel less heavy. And yet, there will be days when this practice feels far away. Days when old habits return. When the voice of the inner critic is louder than usual. When you forget to be gentle. That's okay. The measure of metta is not in perfection. It's in the return. You return like a parent who's been waiting at the door all along. You return like a quiet friend who never gave up on you. And when you return, something begins to shift. The parts of you that were once exiled, the ones you buried under shame or silence, they begin to trust again. They step forward, they speak, they ask for what they need. And this time, you listen. Because now you understand. Loving kindness isn't indulgence. It's liberation. You don't become lazy. You become alive. You don't lose your edge. You lose your self-hate. You don't float away. You come home. You begin to live from a center that is unshakable. Not because life stops being hard, but because you stop being hard on yourself. That's the quiet power of metta. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It doesn't perform. It waits. It returns. It heals. And so do you. There's a moment, right after the kindness has been offered. After the tears have softened. After the old voices have been heard. A stillness settles in. Not an answer. Not a fix. Not a dramatic transformation. Just stillness. A quiet that holds everything, without asking for anything to change. This stillness isn't empty. It's full of presence. And this is the next step of the journey. We turn our attention toward this subtle, powerful space, a space where nothing is forced, and yet everything is met, a space where your nervous system remembers how to rest without needing permission. This is what we call the sacred pause. The sacred pause is not about stopping life. It's not a retreat from the world. It's not zoning out or turning away. It's the opposite. The pause is when you choose to step back, not to avoid, but to reconnect. It is a radical act of wholeness. In the Mahayana Buddhist tradition, the path of compassion doesn't begin with effort. It begins with knowing how to stop. To stop running, to stop fixing, to stop analyzing or solving, just long enough to feel what is really here. Modern life teaches us to respond instantly, to reply to texts in seconds, to make decisions fast, to keep moving, keep producing, keep doing. But underneath that constant motion, your body is quietly asking, can we breathe? Can we slow down long enough to feel safe again? The sacred pause answers that call. It offers a break in the loop. Not the kind of break where you escape into distractions, but the kind of stillness where you begin to hear yourself again. Still enough to feel your own aliveness. Still enough to remember, you are here. From a nervous system perspective, this pause helps reset the stress response. When we live in constant stimulation, fueled by fear, pressure, and responsibility, the body stays in sympathetic mode. The heart races, muscles brace, digestion slows. But when you pause with gentle awareness, you activate the parasympathetic state, the body's natural mode for healing and restoration. You don't command your body to calm down. You don't push your mind into silence. Instead, you gently step out of the momentum. You let the nervous system unwind, like a spinning top that's finally allowed to slow down. This is why compassion practices in Mahayana Buddhism begin with grounding, not with reaching upward, but with rooting downward, not with trying to transcend life, but with learning how to stay with it. Here, now, before offering care to anyone else. The bodhisattva learns to sit, to breathe, to feel. The pause isn't separate from compassion. It is compassion, because when you pause, you stop reacting from fear. You stop projecting old pain onto new situations. You begin to respond from presence. And presence is never neutral. It carries warmth. It carries clarity. But above all, it carries the quiet energy of enough. The pause says, nothing more is needed right now. Just this breath. That moment of stillness may seem small, but it quietly interrupts the cycle of self-rejection. When you pause, you're no longer running from discomfort or grasping at relief. You're saying, I'm here, even if it's messy, even if I don't know what comes next. And that, just being here, is an act of deep self-trust. The sacred pause is also a doorway. It lets you see what lies beneath all the noise. Sometimes it's old grief. Sometimes it's fear that never had a voice. Sometimes it's anger that's been hiding in your shoulders for years. But these emotions don't rise up to punish you. They surface, because, for the first time, there's enough stillness for them to be heard, gently. This is where healing the nervous system becomes a spiritual practice. You're not just managing symptoms. You're welcoming what was once exiled. You're telling your body and heart, you don't have to hide anymore. And slowly, gently, those layers begin to unwind. But let's be honest, the pause isn't always comfortable. Stillness can feel unsettling. For someone who's learned to survive through constant motion, stillness can even feel like drowning, when you've used busyness as protection. That's why the sacred pause must be approached with respect, not demand. You ease into it. You learn its rhythm. You learn its language. One of the most powerful tools in this practice is noticing. Noticing when you start speeding up. when your breath gets shallow, when your shoulders inch up toward your ears. These are signs that you've momentarily left yourself. And the pause? It's a gentle invitation to return. To your breath, to your body, to your heart, and it doesn't take hours. Sometimes, it's 3 slow breaths. Sometimes, it's placing your hand on your chest before replying. Sometimes, it's simply saying, "Let me think about that," instead of responding from pressure or fear. These are small gestures, but they carry deep impact. Because the pause isn't a technique. It's a relationship. You are learning to relate to yourself. Without urgency, without force, you are learning to trust that nothing will fall apart if you take a breath. That not everything has to be solved immediately. That your value is not measured by your speed. The sacred pause also teaches healthy boundaries. Not hard walls, but gentle lines that protect your energy and guide your choices. The pause helps you wait before saying yes. It helps you feel into your decisions. It helps you ask, "Is my body opening or bracing?" You stop living from obligation and begin listening for what's true. And when you listen long enough, something opens. That quiet, inner wisdom, the one that's been drowned out by noise for years, finally begins to speak, and you begin to act, not from habit, but from alignment, not from panic, but from truth. In Mahayana compassion training, this is called skillful means, upaya, the path of wise action. Not rushed, not reactive, but rooted in presence, and guided by love, pausing before you act. It might sound simple, but it's what makes compassion skillful. Instead of impulsive, without the pause, you might give when you're already depleted, speak when it's not the right time, or try to fix something that was never yours to carry. But with the pause, you become attuned. You feel the space inside you. You sense the moment around you. And compassion begins to flow, exactly where it's needed, without draining you in the process. This shift also changes the way you receive life. When something difficult happens, a tough conversation, a mistake, a moment of challenge, the pause creates space before judgment. You're not caught in old patterns anymore. You're not reacting from fear, habit, or defense. You're meeting life with clarity. And clarity allows room for so much more. Forgiveness, understanding, even humor. The pause also reconnects you to something we often ignore: the rhythm of the body. So many of us live out of sync with our natural energy cycles. We push through fatigue. We override hunger. We ignore pain. But when you pause, you begin to listen again. You hear your body whisper, "Now, I need rest. Now, I'm ready to move. This is too much." And when you honor that, something powerful begins to take root. A deep inner trust. Trust that you won't abandon yourself for the sake of being productive. Trust that your experience matters. That rest is not failure. It's wisdom. One of the most beautiful things about this practice is how simple it is. You don't need silence. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need a single moment. Even in a noisy room, you can pause. Even in the heat of conflict, you can pause. The breath is always there, quietly waiting to be remembered. And this doesn't mean you're escaping life. It means you're returning to it, more fully than before. When you pause, you begin to see more clearly. The shade of the sky, the tone in someone's voice, the tension in your jaw. You begin to feel your way back to the truth of the moment. The sacred pause is an act of reverence for your life, for your body, for the quiet intelligence that lives underneath the noise. You begin to realize that all this rushing, it's just fear, disguised. And stillness? It's not emptiness. It's the space where meaning can finally rise. As you begin to pause more often, You may feel emotions that surprise you. Grief that never had time to land. Joy that was too quiet to notice before. You begin to discover that your inner life, it's richer than you ever thought. Stillness isn't boring. It's alive. And your body knows it. Sleep deepens. Breath softens. Digestion balances. But beyond all of that, your relationship to yourself begins to soften. You no longer feel the need to rush through life. You stop measuring your worth by how much you do or achieve. And you come to see something quietly profound. This moment, just as it is enough to begin again. That's the hidden wisdom of the sacred pause. It teaches you how to begin again, not because you've failed, but because you've chosen kindness. Every time you pause, you return to yourself, and every return reminds you that you are whole. Not because everything is perfect, but because you're present. You don't need to live on high alert. You don't need to earn your peace. You just need to stop for long enough to remember you are here, you are breathing, and that is enough. Let it be enough, and let this pause, right here, right now, hold you. Somewhere in that space between stillness and return, a quiet question begins to rise. If I pause long enough to truly hear myself, what will I do with what I find? Because not everything you meet inside will feel calm, not everything will feel kind. Underneath the breath and presence, there are still old voices echoing. The critic, the doubter, the one who demands more. Their sharpness doesn't disappear with silence. It softens for a moment, then sometimes returns. And this is where most people stop. They get afraid of what lives beneath the quiet. But let me tell you something. This is where the real healing begins. The next step on this journey isn't about silence, and it's not just about stillness. It's about relationship. How do you relate to the parts of you that hurt you? How do you speak to that voice in your mind? The one that whispers, "You're lazy, you're weak, you're broken." Most of us don't even realize it. But we live with that voice every day. And we've gotten used to it. So much so that we start to believe it's normal. But it doesn't have to be. The answer lies in a forgotten practice. It's a practice often spoken of in how we treat others. But it becomes most powerful when turned inward. It's called ahimsa, non-violence. But ahimsa isn't just about what you don't do. It's not only about refusing to harm others. Ahimsa is a posture of the heart. It's a decision, moment by moment, to respond with gentleness, even when pain arises, especially when the pain is inside you. Because this is where most inner violence begins, not from hatred, but from habit, from years of believing that being hard on yourself was necessary to grow, to succeed, to become better. And maybe, at one point, you thought your inner critic was helping you. That without it, you'd collapse, fall apart, lose your drive. But the truth is, fear-based discipline only leads to burnout, disconnection, a tension that never fully lets go. Ahimsa offers another path: discipline without violence, accountability without shame, growth without self-attack. To understand what that really means, you have to first recognize what inner violence looks like. It's not always a loud voice shouting insults. Sometimes, it's that quiet, relentless pressure, the guilt that creeps in when you try to rest. The thought that says, you haven't done enough, even when you're bone tired. It's comparing yourself to others. Not to learn or grow, but to confirm that you're falling behind. That's inner violence. And it splits you. It turns your mind into two sides, attacker and attacked. Over time, that war inside starts to wear you down. Ahimsa begins by noticing that war, not with blame, but with clarity. You start to recognize the voice of inner harm. And instead of believing it, you question it. Where did this come from? Who taught me that I have to be perfect to be worthy of love? You don't fight the voice. Fighting creates more resistance, more division. Instead, you observe it, like you would a scared child, throwing a tantrum, with patience, with understanding, and with a soft, kind boundary that gently says, "You're not in charge anymore." That's how the healing begins. You're not trying to shut the voice down. You're trying to meet the fear beneath it. Because every harsh voice started somewhere. Every self-attack is rooted in an old pain. Maybe it came from a moment when you were humiliated, abandoned, shamed, and your mind made a rule to protect you. If I'm always perfect, I'll never be rejected again. If I push myself harder than everyone else, I'll finally feel worthy. But here's the thing, your mind doesn't know when it's safe to let go of old rules. So those rules keep running, even long after the danger has passed. Ahimsa is the practice of telling your system, the danger is over. You're safe now. You don't have to hurt yourself to survive. That's how the healing begins. Not with force, but with curiosity. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you ask, "What do I need right now?" Instead of pushing through exhaustion, you ask, "Can I rest and still respect myself?" These small shifts, these questions, change the chemistry of your brain. They move you from a state of threat to a state of connection. The nervous system begins to trust again. And this is not weakness. This is strength. The kind of strength that doesn't require armor. The kind of strength that grows from the soft soil of self-respect. The kind of strength that heals from the inside out. This is what inner strength really looks like. Not the kind that grits its teeth or pushes through pain at all costs, but the kind that dares to pause and say, "Maybe there's another way." It takes strength to interrupt the cycles that were handed to you so early. You didn't even realize they were optional. Ahimsa, non-violence, isn't just about how we treat others. It's about how we treat our own emotions when they show up uninvited. Anger doesn't make you bad. Sadness doesn't mean you're broken. Fear doesn't mean you've failed. But here's where it gets tricky. When those emotions arise, and the very first thing we do is judge them, we add a second layer of pain. The emotion already hurts, but the judgment? That isolates you. That shuts the door. Ahimsa teaches a gentler way. It invites you to say, "This feeling is here. I don't have to like it. But I don't have to punish myself for it either." In that space, self-compassion stops being soft. It becomes something stronger. It becomes protection, a boundary against self-harm. Emotional, mental, even physical. One of the quietest forms of inner violence is perfectionism. On the outside, it looks like discipline, but underneath, it's often fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of being not enough. Fear of being seen too clearly. And so, we strive, we polish, we hide our mess. But ahimsa turns on the light. Not to shame the fear, but to gently understand it. You begin to ask, what if I'm enough, even when I fail? What if I'm still worthy, even when I let someone down? These aren't motivational quotes. They're questions that loosen what's been clenched for years. They let softness in, not weakness, but space. Space to be human. And here's the paradox. When you stop beating yourself up, you actually become more motivated. Why? Because your energy is no longer tied up in pretending, in defending, in recovering from your own attacks. That energy is now free to act, to create, to contribute, without betrayal, without collapse. Ahimsa also changes how you relate to regret. We all have moments we wish we could undo. Things we said, choices we made, times we gave up on ourselves. Too soon. And often, our inner voice holds those memories like weapons. You'll never change. You always mess things up. But self-reconciliation, it doesn't erase the past. It gently turns the page. You see the pain. You feel the impact. But you allow for growth. Not denial. Not pretending it didn't happen. Just growth. Maybe that means writing a letter to your past self. Not to excuse, but to understand. Maybe it means apologizing inwardly to someone you can't reach anymore. Not as a punishment, but as a way of restoring your own integrity. Because these small acts of truth are how peace begins to return. Ahimsa also makes space for uncertainty. So much inner conflict comes from trying to control everything. We want answers. We want plans. We want to know what's next. And when we can't find certainty, we turn that discomfort inward. We blame ourselves for not knowing, but ahimsa allows you to say, I don't know, and that's okay for now. And in that small permission, the grip releases. You meet uncertainty, not with panic, but with presence. This practice reaches even into your everyday language. Pay attention to how often you say things like, I'm so stupid. I always ruin everything. These aren't harmless phrases. They're repetitions of an identity built on harm. But when you notice, you can begin to replace them. Not with sugary positivity, but with truth. That was hard. And I'm learning. I made a mistake. But I am not a mistake. These are not feel-good slogans. They are medicine. They restore something that was once fractured. They bring honesty and kindness into the same sentence. And when that happens, the whole inner world starts to feel safer. Ahimsa also invites you to notice how you hold success. For many of us, rest feels suspicious. Joy feels undeserved. We downplay our wins. We shrink our celebrations. And yet, this too is a form of harm. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to feel joy, without holding your breath, waiting for it to be taken away. Each moment of celebration is a soft rebellion against a lifetime of self-denial. Allowing yourself to thrive, without apology, without guilt, is an act of non-violence. It says, I will no longer punish myself for being human. I will no longer dim my light, just to make others comfortable. But ahimsa is not about erasing all discomfort. It's not about bypassing the messiness of being alive. You will still feel anger. You will still feel grief, desire, frustration, confusion. Ahimsa doesn't erase these emotions. It honors them, but it refuses to turn them into punishment. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can feel sorrow without calling yourself broken. You can feel longing without naming it shameful. This is what integration means. Not controlling your feelings, not denying your past, but letting every part of you have a seat at the table and offering it tea. Because in the end, ahimsa is not a performance. It's not about being nice. It's not a smiling mask. It's about becoming whole. When you stop dividing yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, worthy and unworthy, you return to your original form. And your original form is not perfect. It's full. It's changing. It's real. That's what heals the fragmentation. Not fixing. Not suppressing. Just witnessing. With care. Speaking. With kindness. Choosing again and again to walk the path that undoes harm, with gentleness. Maybe it starts small. A pause before you respond to yourself. A hand on your chest. In the middle of a panic. A whispered reminder. Growth isn't linear. And I'm allowed to be where I am. These are not dramatic acts. But they are sacred ones. They are how you reclaim your dignity. How you interrupt old stories. How you stop passing on the hurt that was once handed to you. And that is where healing becomes legacy. Not just for you, but for everyone you touch. The world doesn't need more people pretending to be perfect. It needs people who have made peace with their imperfections, who walk gently because they know the pain of walking in harsh shoes. So next time your inner voice grows sharp, pause, listen, breathe, and then answer with the words that maybe no one ever said to you, but you now know how to say, "I'm doing my best, and for now, that's enough." Let those words be the beginning of a new relationship with yourself, with your story, with the world. Let ahimsa be the path that holds it all together. And as the harshness softens, as the old voices lose their grip, under your steady care, a deeper question begins to rise. A quiet one, but powerful. If I am not the judgments I once believed, not the failures I feared, not even the stories I carried for so long, then what am I? When you stop fighting yourself, what's left? This isn't a crisis. This is the doorway. You are not disappearing. You are beginning to touch something sacred, and wide, and ancient. This is where we meet a teaching that's often misunderstood, but quietly liberating. Shunyata, emptiness. But not the emptiness that wounds. Not the one that feels cold or numb. This is not a void. It's a space. Not a lack, but a release. It doesn't erase meaning. It reveals that meaning was never confined to any one shape. It was never trapped in perfection, in control, in identity. It was always here, open, fluid, free. And that's the quiet gift of emptiness. It doesn't erase your story. It simply reminds you that you are not your story. You are the awareness in which all stories rise and fall. A presence that has never been broken, even when everything else seemed to be. In this space, you begin to live differently. You listen more deeply. You stop needing every answer to be certain, every feeling to be permanent, every part of you to make sense. You stop clinging to becoming, and begin relaxing into being. This being is not passive. It's spacious. It's the calm that acts when needed, rests when needed, forgives when needed, not because it's perfect, but because it's free. And this freedom, this gentle clarity of emptiness, doesn't isolate you from life. It connects you more intimately to it. You begin to see others not as fixed identities, but as processes, as weather patterns, as tender, ever-changing beings just like you. You no longer need to win every argument. You no longer have to fix every flaw. You no longer chase permanence in impermanent things. Instead, you meet life with open hands. You soften your grip. You breathe. And in that breath, you discover peace not because everything is resolved, but because nothing needs to be held so tightly anymore. Even the search for meaning becomes lighter. You realize that the most meaningful moments are often the simplest ones. When you are fully here. When you truly see. When your heart says, yes, to this exact moment, without needing it to be different. This is where the journey brings you. Not to some distant mountaintop. Not to a perfected version of yourself. But right here, to this breath, to this body, to this present moment awareness that holds all things gently. Here, you don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to perform enlightenment. You just let go, again and again, until letting go becomes the path. Until the space itself becomes the refuge. Let this be your practice. Not to escape life, but to meet it fully. Without clinging, without rejecting, with awareness wide enough to let everything come and go, and a heart soft enough to stay, because in the end, emptiness is not a void. It is a love without condition, a peace without requirement, a freedom that doesn't need escape, only presence. You are already here. Let that be enough. Let that be home. So as this video comes to a close, take one more breath. Soft, unhurried, present. Let the words settle not as something to remember, but as something to gently return to whenever you need. You don't have to do anything right now. You don't need to change or fix yourself. Just rest in this awareness, as it holds you with the quiet strength of compassion. If this journey spoke to something within you, feel free to come back to it whenever your heart needs a pause. A reminder, a place to begin again. And if you'd like to keep walking this path with us, you're warmly invited to subscribe to Daily Dharma Wisdom. Together, we'll keep exploring these gentle truths about presence, about healing, about the kind of peace that doesn't shout, but stays. Until next time, may you be well, may you be safe, and may you always find your way back to the stillness that never left.